Somaliland, a land that defies misconceptions and exposes the hidden truths buried in history. Once a British protectorate, Somaliland gained its sovereignty on June 26, 1960. The international community didn't waste a moment in recognizing this new nation. Over 35 countries, including influential members of the United Nations Security Council like China, the United States, and the United Kingdom, quickly acknowledged Somaliland's independence. It was a proud moment for the people and their newfound nation. Over 30 states sent congratulatory telegrams to the Somaliland government, welcoming it to the comedy of nations. But here's where the story takes a disturbing turn. Soon after, there was talk of a merger between Somaliland and Somalia, aiming to create an ethno-national state called the Somali Republic. However, due to legal blunders, this merger never materialized. Contrary to popular belief, in 1960 it was Somalia that merged with the already recognized state of Somaliland, while Somalia itself was under a United Nations trusteeship. It's important to understand that Somaliland has never been a part of Somalia. In fact, it was Somalia that merged with the already recognized state of Somaliland, while Somalia itself was under a United Nations trusteeship. Now let's dig into the legal perspective. Somaliland's initial parliament approved a draft act of union, envisioning the creation of the Somali Republic by bringing together Somaliland and Somalia to create this third country. However, Somalia's parliament didn't ratify the act passed by Somaliland. Instead, they drafted their own version in Italian, which got rejected by Somalilanders in 1961 by majority. Neither act received mutual ratification, rendering the union legally invalid, and that union has been referred to as being an illegal union, which was never ratified. To conclude, both unratified act of unions by Somaliland and Somalia. So, in essence, the Somali Republic never truly existed as a legitimate and fully functioning state, yet Somalia attempted to assert itself as the legal successor of the state of Somaliland. This claim, however, is flawed and misleading. In fact, the former president of Somalia, Adan Ade, even registered the UN seat as the Somali Republic, which originated from the state of Somaliland independence. This act can be seen as a fraud perpetrated against the state of Somaliland. To this day, Somalia continues to use the credentials of Somaliland from June 26 for the UN seat, and falsely presents itself as the Republic of Somaliland. Somalia, initially designated as a UN trusteeship set to gain independence in December 1960, but quickly and without consent acquired Somaliland's documents and secured a UN seat on July 1st. This act can be seen as a fraud perpetrated against the state of Somaliland. Then, the situation quickly went from union to occupation. For over 60 years, Somalia has occupied Somaliland, a situation that persists to this day, from 1961 to 1990, and here's why. Only Somaliland was regarded as a state, and the independent one in 1960. Till today, Somalia is unable to bring a single shred of evidence showing a union between Somaliland and Somalia that met all the requirements of international law to make it valid and binding, not a single one. The idea of Somaliland being a secessionist is merely a narrative of Somalia and not a legal reality. In 2005, the African Union Fact-Finding Mission concluded there no union or ratification. The fact-finding mission in 2005, which has summarized its findings as Somaliland's search for recognition is historically unique and self-justified in African political history. But it's time to uncover the truth. The international community will eventually deal with this. Somalia can't occupy Somaliland for any longer. Somalia's clinging to this bogus unity is driven by the fact that they lack solidifying documents to support their own situation. It is unfair that Somaliland's documents are being used by Somalia at the UN, while Somalia itself lacks the proper credentials. But there's more to the story. Somalia, unlike Somaliland, faces a significant challenge when it comes to internationally demarcated or defined borders. When Somalia became a state, it inherited a boundary problem left behind by Italy.
marka issue ma qadiyad maanta taagan ma aha laakiin waa meeshaasi taagantaa taariikhiyeed meeshaasi joogtaa.
Adding to the complexity, Somalia lacks a definitive piece of paper to indicate its sovereignty guarantee. In contrast, Somaliland possesses well-documented credentials and independence documents. The absence of international re-recognition and the dispute surrounding Somalia's changing the narrative to secessionists covered up the reality. Meanwhile, Somaliland stands firm with its legally recognized status and documented independence. Somaliland, despite its rightful claim to sovereignty and its efforts to seek recognition, faces resistance from Somalia. Somalia knows that if the case were to be taken to the international court, they would likely lose, further complicating their position.
It just complains and complains instead of taking things to the international court like any other country who is seeking justice. If they really think Somaliland is theirs and Ethiopia is in the wrong, why not prove it where it matters? In front of the international court? Going to trial would show everyone what the true facts are. They must know the international court would figure out pretty quick that Somalia occupied Somaliland. Even worse, going to court might make Somalia held accountable for the killing of all innocent Isaaq people and open the Isaaq genocides case. No wonder Somalia would rather push for a propaganda go to the court and get in trouble for its occupation. It's pretty obvious Somalia just wants to confuse everyone with media propaganda instead of dealing with things properly through law. They know their story wouldn't hold up if judges started asking real questions and demand evidence. If Somalia's claim was solid, why all the fuss about proving it? A lot of people assume Somaliland's quest for regaining their statehood started in 1991. That's not true. Actually, it started in 1961, right after the occupation of the Republic of Somaliland. From that very first year of occupation, the people of Somaliland resisted. Just 1 year after Somalia's illegal union, Somaliland held a referendum where the majority voted against union with Somalia. Their choice failed to be respected. Somaliland officers led by Abdullahi Congo carried out the first liberation coup attempt to free their occupied country in 1961. A group of Somaliland military officers were put on trial for treason in Somalia's Supreme Court. However, the presiding judge dismissed the charges, confirming that no legal act of union between Somaliland and Somalia ever existed.
nimankan wax dambi oo ku cabdi oo la cadeyn kara ma jiro nimankan horta ay u dhaarteen asalkooda militarigan isigeeyay dawladana sheegaysaa ay u dhaarteen annaga dawladdu ma dhaaran marka annaga waxa Soomaaliya dawladda Soomaaliyeed ee imkan xukumaysa shaqaba kuma lahayn wadankuna si wanaagsan isma raacin jurisdiction kii xuduudkii Somaliland waa laga baxay waxa la yiraahdo procedure waxa la wixii legality oo dhanbu ya markii hadii Hargeysa lagu xukumo على الأقل وحنا نروح قال لأن من military قد كوكعي أما ده اللي ما يلبوا أنا قبصنا وحنا نلو دون لا يقول حلو واحد لو هي تروح حلو دين لنا هي ويجي تبع
marka halka waxa ka soo bixi karta in xitaa aanu jirin wax in sharciyo midnimo muujinaya oo xeero laba dawladood isku dirsaday wax ka hadlayeen inuu jirin baa ka soo baxaysa
horta laba dawladood israacsan ma jirin ba waxaanu cadeynay dawladana leedin waa la dagaalanteen oo inqilaab ku sabab loo cadeeyo halkii joogto waa dawladda labada qawaaniin leh waa dawladda labada gees kale leh wax isku xilaabo ma jiraanba wax qaanuuno meesha ka jira ma jiraan tijuub waa isku qaadi karaa tijuubkiina waa naga soo saaray looyariinta international loo keenay wixii baa waxaa caddaatay inaan kaysna lagu helayay no case to answer bay yidhahdeen case nimanka lagu heli karaya ma jiro
ma isla markii maxkamaddu toos bay idin sii daysay miyaa
maxkamaddu toos bay inoo sii waanu kala yar dambaynaynu isla maalintii
This has marked the beginning of Somaliland's long freedom fight. They have continually resisted Somalia's illegal takeover of their land through multiple uprisings and liberation movements over the past 60 years. Again in 1979, another liberation attempt was made against Somalia's illegal occupation. On March 13, 1979, leading Somaliland officers Raubul Mariano and Ahmed Ismail Dugs carried out an uprising aimed at reclaiming Somaliland's independence. In response, they were accused and imprisoned by the Somalia government on charges of treason for trying to end Somalia's occupation and free their homeland. Despite the risks, these officers and many others continued resisting through rebellion and underground movements, determined to eventually throw off Somalia's illegitimate rule and restore Somaliland's stolen sovereignty. Then in 1988, when Somaliland declared fighting against occupation of Somalia, Somalia's response was the genocidal massacre of the Isaaq clan, known as the Isaaq Genocide, that left Somaliland completely destroyed. It was only in 1991 Somaliland was finally able to regain its sovereignty from Somalia's occupation. However, the struggle continues today as Somalia continues pushing the narrative by falsely claiming Somaliland is seceding, when in reality it was Somalia that first annexed and occupied the Republic of Somaliland against the will of its people. Illegally diminishing Somaliland from a state to a mere region, Somalia fabricated the fiction of a unitary to legitimize its occupation.